The year is 1888, a time when the world was on the cusp of modernity, yet still deeply entrenched in the shadows of the past. The place Whitechapel, a poverty-stricken district in London's East End. Here the streets were narrow and winding, filled with the hustle and bustle of daily life, yet overshadowed by the grim realities of poverty and despair. Fear gripped the cobbled streets as a shadowy figure, known only as Jack the Ripper, stalked the night. The fog rolled in thick, cloaking the streets in an eerie silence, broken only by the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the occasional cry of a street vendor. He preyed on vulnerable women, leaving behind a trail of mutilated bodies and unanswered questions. Each attack was more brutal than the last, sending waves of terror through the community. The police, baffled and overwhelmed, struggled to piece together the clues left behind. The name Jack the Ripper, coined from a letter sent to the Central News Agency, became synonymous with terror, mystery, and the darkest corners of human nature. This letter, filled with taunts and gruesome details, only deepened the public's fear and fascination. The Whitechapel murders, brutal and shocking, sent shockwaves through Victorian society and beyond. Newspapers across the country and even the world reported on the grisly details, each new revelation more horrifying than the last. The audacity of the crimes committed in the heart of one of the world's most powerful cities was unfathomable. London, a beacon of progress and civilization, found itself grappling with a darkness that seemed to defy reason and understanding. The Ripper case, with its blend of horror, mystery, and social commentary, continues to captivate and intrigue us over a century later. Modern-day detectives and historians still pore over the old archives, hoping to uncover new clues or insights that might finally solve the mystery. The identity of Jack the Ripper remains one of the most enduring mysteries in criminal history. Over the years, countless theories have been proposed, each with its own set of suspects and motives, yet none have definitively unmasked the killer. Despite countless theories, suspects, and investigations, his true face remains hidden behind a veil of speculation and supposition. Theories range from the plausible to the fantastical, each adding another layer to the enigma. Was he a doctor, a butcher, a madman, or someone hiding in plain sight? Theories abound, each more intriguing than the last. Some suggest he was a member of the upper class, using his status to evade suspicion, while others believe he was a deranged individual driven by a twisted compulsion. This essay delves into the chilling story of Jack the Ripper, exploring the historical context, the victims, the suspects, and the enduring legacy of this elusive Victorian villain. We will examine the lives of the women he targeted, the societal conditions that allowed such horrors to occur, and the lasting impact on our collective consciousness. Prepare to step back in time into the fog-laden streets of Whitechapel and confront the darkness that continues to fascinate and horrify. As we journey through this tale of terror, we will seek to understand not just the man behind the murders, but the world that created him. The victims of Jack the Ripper were women, often living in poverty and driven to prostitution to survive. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, human beings whose lives were tragically cut short. The canonical five, as they're now known, are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. These women, often forgotten in the shadow of their killer's infamy, represent the human cost of this unsolved mystery. Their stories, pieced together from fragmented historical records, paint a grim picture of life and death in London's underbelly. Each victim bore the horrific signature of the Ripper's brutality. Their throats were slashed, their bodies mutilated, often with surgical precision. The savagery of the attacks, coupled with their public nature, fueled a climate of terror in Whitechapel. Women were afraid to walk alone, especially at night. The Ripper's reign of terror, though relatively short, left an indelible mark on the collective psyche of Victorian England. The vulnerability of the victims, their marginalised status, and the gruesome nature of their deaths forced society to confront the dark undercurrents lurking beneath the veneer of Victorian respectability. Jack the Ripper's modus operandi, though not uniform across all his suspected victims, exhibited a chilling pattern. His reign of terror in the late 19th century left an indelible mark on the streets of Victorian London, a city already grappling with poverty and crime. He typically targeted women in the early hours of the morning, often on weekends when the streets were deserted and darkness provided cover. These women, often vulnerable and alone, became easy prey for a predator who thrived in the shadows. The eerie silence of the early morning hours was frequently shattered by the discovery of yet another victim. The attacks were swift and brutal, marked by a ferocity that shocked even seasoned police officers. The sheer violence of the crimes left the community in a state of perpetual fear. Each new murder scene presented a gruesome tableau that was more horrifying than the last, leaving the police and public alike in a state of shock and disbelief. The Ripper's weapon of choice was a sharp knife, likely honed to a keen edge, which he used to inflict deep slashes to the throat, often severing the carotid artery. This method ensured a quick yet agonizing death, and the precision of these cuts suggested a chilling level of premeditation and skill. The precision of these cuts suggested a familiarity with human anatomy, fueling speculation that the killer might have possessed medical knowledge or experience. This theory was bolstered by the fact that the Ripper often removed specific organs from his victims, a task that would have required a certain degree of anatomical understanding. Beyond the initial throat wounds, the Ripper often mutilated his victims' bodies, removing organs with a chilling detachment. This level of mutilation was not only a physical assault, but also a psychological one, intended to instill terror in the hearts of the community. The removal of organs, such as the uterus or kidneys, added a macabre layer to the already horrifying crimes. This gruesome aspect of the crimes further fueled public fear and speculation, giving rise to theories that the killer was a surgeon, a butcher, or someone with a morbid fascination with the human body. The public's imagination ran wild, and the press capitalized on this, often sensationalizing the details to sell more papers. Theories abounded, but none brought the police any closer to catching the elusive killer. The Ripper's ability to vanish into the labyrinthine streets of Whitechapel after each murder, leaving behind little to no trace, added to his mystique and the growing sense of panic in the East End. The narrow, fog-filled alleyways provided the perfect escape routes, allowing him to melt away into the night, unseen and uncatchable. This ability to disappear so completely only added to the legend of Jack the Ripper. The police, despite their best efforts, seemed powerless to stop him. Their frustration was palpable as each new murder brought them no closer to identifying the killer. The lack of forensic technology and the sheer chaos of the crime scenes left them grasping at straws. The Ripper's reign of terror continued unabated, leaving a legacy of fear and mystery that endures to this day. The Whitechapel murders sparked a massive manhunt, one of the largest and most complex criminal investigations of the Victorian era. The gruesome nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, instilling a sense of urgency and desperation among the authorities. Scotland Yard, under immense pressure to apprehend the killer, deployed a significant number of officers to patrol the streets of Whitechapel, hoping to catch the Ripper in the act or prevent further killings. The streets were filled with the echoing footsteps of officers, their eyes scanning every shadow, every alleyway, in a relentless pursuit of the elusive murderer. Despite their efforts, the investigation was hampered by a number of factors. The detectives faced a labyrinth of challenges, from the lack of advanced forensic techniques to the overwhelming number of false leads and red herrings that clouded their path. The dimly lit streets of Whitechapel, often shrouded in fog, provided ample cover for the killer. The thick, swirling mist created an eerie atmosphere, making it nearly impossible for the officers to see more than a few feet ahead. It was as if the fog itself conspired with the Ripper, cloaking his movements in secrecy. Eyewitness accounts were often unreliable, conflicting, or tainted by the fear and speculation that gripped the community. People were terrified, and their imaginations ran wild, leading to exaggerated or completely fabricated stories that only served to muddy the waters of the investigation. Adding to the investigative challenges, forensic science was in its infancy. The tools and techniques that modern investigators take for granted were simply not available to the detectives of the time. Fingerprinting was in its early stages of development, and DNA analysis was non-existent. The detectives had to rely on more rudimentary methods, such as examining physical evidence and trying to piece together the puzzle from the scant clues left behind. Investigators relied on eyewitness accounts, physical evidence found at the crime scenes, and the hope of catching a lucky break. They meticulously combed through every piece of evidence, no matter how small, in the hopes that it would lead them to the killer. The police pursued numerous leads, questioning hundreds of individuals and detaining several suspects. Each new lead brought a glimmer of hope, only to be dashed when the suspect was cleared of any involvement. However, none of these leads panned out, and the Ripper remained frustratingly elusive. The detectives' frustration grew with each dead end, their determination unwavering, but their spirits increasingly worn down by the lack of progress. The lack of a concrete suspect, coupled with the gruesome nature of the crimes, allowed fear and speculation to flourish in the absence of answers. The newspapers were filled with sensational headlines, and the public's imagination ran wild with theories and accusations. The Ripper's shadow loomed large over Whitechapel, a constant reminder of the terror that lurked in the fog.